Chapter 1. A Task in the Shadows. The chamber was shrouded in darkness, as was fitting for the seat of power in Clan Eshin. The scent of damp stone and rancid musk hung thick in the air. A low, steady drip echoed from the far reaches of the cavernous hall, where torches sputtered weakly in iron sconces, their flames fighting the oppressive gloom. At the heart of the chamber, upon a dais of polished obsidian, sat the Night Lord. Krrask Thin-Tail stood in silence, his black fur blending seamlessly with the shadows. He was no stranger to this place, or the suffocating weight of the Night Lord's gaze. The assassin's tail flicked once, betraying his unease as he knelt, claws scratching the cold floor. Around him the chittering whispers of lesser Skaven advisors faded into nothingness as the Night Lord raised a hand, clawed and skeletal, to signal silence. "Krrask Thin-Tail," the Night Lord hissed, his voice slithering through the air like an oily serpent. "You are called, summoned, chosen. Here, listen, yes, a task most crucial awaits." The assassin tilted his head slightly, waiting. One did not speak until bidden in the presence of the Night Lord. "Tunos pa da food. Their sko de joma is the Fuma territory, prided with wealth and foolish pride." The Night Lord continued, his teeth glinting in the dim torchlight. "The humans call it Nuln." Krask's ears twitched. Nuln. The name was known even to those outside the surface-dwelling races. It was a city of invention, progress, and deadly war machines. A dangerous place, but also a tempting prize. "The Council of 13 has decided," the Night Lord went on, his tail lashing behind him, "that Nuln must fall. It is strong, yes, but not invincible. Their wealth, their machines, they blind the man-things. Theirs is a city ripe for rot ruin." Krask dared to raise his head. "How will it be done, great Night Lord?" His voice was low and gravelly, devoid of emotion. The Night Lord's lips curled into something resembling a smile. "You will help, assist others," he hissed. "A cult of Slaaneshi hides in Nuln's shadows. These man-things, decadent and weak, they worship the Dark Prince. They will spread discord, chaos from within, while you strike from without." The mention of Slaaneshi made Krask's fur bristle. The Chaos Gods were not to be trusted, even by those who worshipped them. Slaaneshi in particular was known for indulgence, obsession, and depravity, all things the disciplined assassins of Clan Eshin despised. "And to work with man-things?" Krask asked cautiously, his voice dripping with disdain. The Night Lord's smile widened. Yes, and you will do it well. The cult will provide a means, a tool. Use them, yes, but do not trust. The Council demands that Nuln crumble fall. You will see to it." Krask's tail lashed behind him, betraying his irritation. He knew better than to voice his doubts, but the very idea of working alongside humans, let alone a Slaaneshi cult, made his stomach churn. Still, disobedience was unthinkable. "As you command, great Night Lord," Krask said, bowing his head low. Good, the Night Lord hissed, leaning forward so that his crimson eyes seemed to glow in the gloom. "You will find me them in the city. They are expecting you, yes. Do not fail. Disappoint me, Krrask Thin-Tail." The assassin rose smoothly, his movements as fluid and silent as a shadow. "Failure is for lesser Skaven," he said, his tone cold and even. The Night Lord watched him go, his sharp teeth glinting in the torchlight. Yes, he murmured as Krask disappeared into the darkness. "Let us see if you survive." Emerging from the Night Lord's chambers, Krask paused at the edge of the fortress, looking out over the twisting tunnels of Skaven blight. The city was alive with the sounds of chittering, machinery, and distant screams, a symphony of madness. Krask's sharp eyes scanned the horizon, where the toxic fog of the marshlands mingled with the faint, distant light of the surface world. None. A city of man-things, riddled with their arrogance and blind to the storm brewing beneath their feet. It would be dangerous, yes, but Krask relished the challenge. Survival was his craft, and the Night Lord's doubts only stoked the fire of his determination. Still, the idea of working with a Slaaneshi cult gnawed at him. He could almost smell the stench of their excess, their weakness. They would no doubt fail in their ambitions, but if they served as pawns in the Skaven's greater plan, so be it. He would endure their presence and complete his task, for there was no other option. With a final glance back at the shadowed spires of Skavenblight, Krask melted into the tunnels, his mind already turning to the task ahead. Whatever awaited him in Nuln, be it glory, chaos, or betrayal, he would face it, as he always had, with claws sharp, tail ready, and no room for failure. Chapter 2. Arrival in Nuln. The stench of man-things was overwhelming, even here, far below their teeming city. The ancient sewer networks of Nuln stretched for miles, a labyrinth of filth and rot. Perfect cover, Krask thought as he slithered through the damp tunnels, his sharp claws clicking softly against the stone. The fetid air carried the pungent tang of waste, mingled with the faint whiff of human perfumes and incense that leaked from the surface. Krask moved silently, his black fur slick with muck to blend with the shadows. His whiskers twitched as he sniffed the air, detecting faint traces of activity nearby. Torchlight flickered from an opening ahead, a hidden access point, long forgotten by the man-things who foolishly believed their city impenetrable. Man-things are blind stupid, Krask thought, baring his teeth in a sharp grin. They build their city on tunnels they cannot guard, watch. Weak foolish. Creeping closer, he peered through a jagged crack in the stone wall. Beyond, the tunnel widened into a crude hall carved into the sewer itself. Cultists gathered in a loose circle around an altar of writhing, fleshy shapes that pulsed and glowed faintly with unnatural light. The air was thick with incense, its cloying sweetness burning Krask's sensitive nose. The man-things were chanting, their voices rising in fevered ecstasy. Krask's eyes narrowed as he studied them. Some were finely dressed, nobles who had abandoned their high society to wallow in decadence. Others were filthy beggars and urchins, their eyes wild with devotion. They all moved with the same unnatural grace, their bodies contorted in ways that seemed both alluring and grotesque. Disgusting, weak things, he thought, his tail lashing behind him. At the center of the ritual stood a figure draped in silks that shimmered like oil. Luthane, Krask surmised. The cult leader was tall for a man-thing, with a presence that commanded attention even in this vile gathering. His face was sharp and striking, though the edges of his features seemed to blur as if refusing to stay fixed in one shape. His eyes glowed faintly with an unholy light, and his voice carried over the chanting with an intoxicating rhythm. "Embrace the gifts of the Dark Prince," Luthane intoned, spreading his arms wide. "Through indulgence, through perfection, we shall transcend the mortal cage and ascend to glory." The cultists cried out in unison, their voices a cacophony of devotion. Krask's claws itched to silence them all, but he restrained himself. This was not the time for blood. Not yet. The ritual continued, descending into hedonistic revelry. Krask watched from the shadows, his nose wrinkling as the cultists began shedding their clothes, their twisted worship turning into an orgy of excess. His stomach churned at the sight. No discipline, no purpose, just indulgence and weakness. Still, as much as he despised them, he couldn't deny their effectiveness. The cult had managed to remain hidden in the heart of one of the Empire's greatest cities. That, at least, was impressive. Krask bided his time until the ritual finally ended and the cultists dispersed. Luthane lingered at the altar, his hands trailing over the unnatural flesh as if drawing power from it. Krask slipped into the chamber, his movements silent and precise. He emerged from the shadows without a sound, his crimson eyes gleaming in the dim torchlight. "Men think Luthian," Krask hissed, his voice low and venomous. Luthien turned smoothly, as though entirely unsurprised by the intrusion. His lips curled into a smile that was equal parts welcoming and predatory. "Ah, the emissary of the verminous shadows," he said, his voice a silken purr. "Welcome, ally in chaos." Krask's fur bristled at the condescension in the man-thing's tone, but he masked his irritation. "I am Krrask Thin-Tail, summoned by the Night Lord. You know why I am here." "Of course," Luthien said, spreading his arms as if to embrace Krask. "The Skaven, masters of cunning and deceit. We are honored to have you among us." Krrask's ears flattened and his tail flicked sharply. "Do not mock-taunt me, man-thing," he snarled. "I am here to ensure your success, but do not believe that I trust you or your weak, foolish cult." Luthien chuckled, his laugh soft and melodious. "Trust? Oh no, my dear Skaven, I would expect nothing less from your kind. But you will find us useful." Krask's gaze flicked to the altar, then back to Luthien. "You serve the Dark Prince, yes. What is your plan, scheme? Speak, tell me, or I will leave you to the tunnels." Luthien's smile widened, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Patience, Krrask Thin-Tail. All will be revealed in time. For now, consider this your new home. The cult is your ally, your sanctuary. Together, we will bring Nuln to its knees." Krrask said nothing, his claws flexing slightly as he fought the urge to lash out. He could feel the lies dripping from the man-thing's words, but he knew the Night Lord's orders were clear. For now, he would play along. As Luthien turned back to the altar, Krask melted into the shadows, his mind already racing with schemes of his own. He would use the cult, yes, use them and discard them, like all weak things. The fall of Nuln would belong to the Skaven, and Krask would see to it personally. In the shadows, he smiled, a cruel, sharp grin that bared his yellowed teeth. The man-things had no idea what they had invited into their midst. Chapter 3. An Uneasy Alliance. The hideout beneath Nuln was an ugly reflection of the city above. Twisting tunnels and damp chambers, filled with stolen relics and strange, sinuous sculptures dedicated to the Dark Prince. The cultists scurried about like lesser prey, chattering and bickering, but with none of the precision or discipline of Skaven under true leadership. To Krask, it was chaos. Unfocused, undirected chaos, and it made his fur itch. He crouched in the corner of the main chamber, his crimson eyes scanning the room. The cultists had begun to gather for another one of their incessant rituals, muttering their nonsensical man-thing prayers as they prepared the altar. Krask's claws flexed against the stone floor as he watched them, his tail swaying irritably behind him. "People are weak man-things," he muttered under his breath. "Worship slave to your silly Dark Prince. Yes. No strength power, only decay." One of the cultists, a broad-shouldered brute with a shaved head and crude tattoos spiraling across his arms, cast a wary glance in Krask's direction. He didn't speak, but his unease was clear. None of the humans were comfortable in the assassin's presence. They avoided meeting his gaze, and when they spoke to him, their voices were strained, their words carefully measured. "Good," Krask thought with a toothy grin. "They should fear me." Luthen's voice cut through the murmurs as he strode into the chamber, his silken robes trailing behind him. "Gather, my children," he said, his tone both commanding and soothing. "Tonight, we honor the Dark Prince and draw upon his power. Come closer, all of you." Krask remained where he was, his arms crossed over his chest. He had no intention of partaking in whatever twisted ritual these man-things had concocted. Lothra noticed, but said nothing, merely smiling as he gestured for the cultists to form a circle around the altar. Among the gathering was a young man who caught Krask's attention. Elren, they had called him. He was thin and pale, with wild, unkempt hair and a nervous energy that made him stand out even among the jittery cultists. Krask's nose twitched. The boy smelled different, sharper, with an undercurrent of something unnatural. As the ritual began, Elren's unease grew more apparent. He fidgeted with the hem of his robe, his eyes darting around the room as though he expected something to leap out at him. Krask watched him closely, his tail coiling and uncoiling like a serpent. The ritual started simply enough, chanting, incense, the usual absurd theatrics. Luthen moved around the circle, his voice rising and falling in hypnotic waves. The other cultists followed his lead, their voices blending into a discordant hum. But as the chanting grew louder, something shifted in the air. The faint glow of the altar began to intensify, pulsing in time with the chanting. The air grew heavy, charged with energy that made Krask's fur stand on end. He hissed softly, his claws digging into the stone as he prepared for whatever foolishness was about to unfold. It was Elren who broke the rhythm. His hands trembled and his voice faltered, but instead of fading into silence, it rose into a shriek. His eyes widened as an unnatural light erupted from his hands, swirling tendrils of pink and purple energy crackling around him. Krask's tail snapped behind him, his instincts screaming to strike kill, but he held back, his crimson eyes narrowing as he observed the scene. The other cultists recoiled in shock, some shielding their eyes, others crying out in fear. Elren, Luthen barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Control it. Do not let it control you." The boy stumbled backward, his arms flailing as the energy spiraled out of control. The tendrils lashed out, striking the walls and leaving scorch marks where they touched. One bolt nearly hit Krask, who leapt to the side with a snarl. "Something," he hissed, his claws bared. "Stop your foolishness, or I will end it for you." Elren's panic only seemed to fuel the energy, his cries mixing with the crackling of raw chaos. Luthen stepped forward, his movements calm and deliberate despite the danger. He placed a hand on Elren's shoulder, murmuring words in a language Krask did not recognize. Slowly, the tendrils began to fade, the light dimming until it vanished entirely. The chamber fell silent, save for Elren's ragged breathing. He collapsed to his knees, his head hanging low as sweat dripped from his brow. Luthen turned to Krask, his expression unreadable. "You see," he said softly, "the power that lies within him. Untamed, yes, but potent. He is a vessel for the Dark Prince's will." Krask's ears flattened, and he sneered. "Vessel? He is a dangerous, yes, weak stupid. If he loses control again, he will destroy, kill us all." Luthen's smile returned, but there was a sharpness to it now. "And yet he did not. Do not underestimate him, Krrask Thin-Tail. Elren is more than he appears." The assassin scoffed, turning his gaze back to the boy. Elren was still trembling, his hands clenching and unclenching as he stared at the floor. Weak, Krask thought, but perhaps useful. For now, he would tolerate the man-thing's presence. But his claws were ready should Elren's foolishness threaten the mission again. "Watch yourself, man-thing," Krask hissed, his voice low and venomous. "If you fail again, you will not have a second chance. Elren looked up, his pale face marked with a mix of fear and gratitude. He nodded quickly, saying nothing. Krask slunk back into the shadows, his mind already churning with plans. The man-things were weak and foolish, yes, but perhaps they could still serve their purpose, and if not, well, the Night Lord would never know if one or two of his allies disappeared along the way. Chapter 4. The Plan Unfolds. The hideout buzzed with a strange energy. The cultists were gathered in a loose circle around Luthen, who stood at the center like a spider at the heart of its web. Krask watched from the shadows, perched atop a crumbling ledge with his tail coiled beneath him. His crimson eyes glinted as he observed the man-things below, their reverence for Luthen dripping with weakness and desperation. Nick Callum said, "We have our target," Luthen announced, his voice ringing out with theatrical gravitas. The Imperial Gunnery School of Nuln, the heart of the city's strength, its pride, its arrogance. The cultists murmured in excitement, some breaking into broad grins, others nodding with fervent devotion. Krask's ears flicked back, his nose wrinkling as he suppressed a sneer. Man-things, and their foolish pride, he thought. Always so eager to destroy. Break one thing just to replace, build another. The gunnery school is the key, Luthien continued, pacing the circle with slow, deliberate steps. Its forges churn out cannons, mortars, and rifles to arm the Empire's armies. Its engineers create designs that can rival even the might of chaos. If we strike it down, we will rip the beating heart from Nuln's defenses. Luthien raised his hands, his voice growing more intense. Imagine it. The flames consuming their foundries, the screams of their precious engineers, the black smoke blotting out the sun as their pride turns to ash. The cultists erupted into cheers, some throwing their fists into the air, others falling to their knees in worship. Krask rolled his eyes, unimpressed by the theatrics. He dropped from his perch with a soft thud, landing in the circle's edge and cutting the celebration short with his sudden appearance. Elin. What is the plan scheme, man-thing? He hissed, his voice sharp and cutting. Words mean nothing. Action, yes, is what matters. Luthien turned to face Krask, his smile unfaltering despite the assassin's interruption. Patience, my Skaven friend, he said smoothly. We will act soon. But first, we must prepare. Prepare, Krask repeated, his tail lashing irritably. Your weak, foolish cult is not ready. You do not have strength, precision. How will you break such a stronghold without failure? Prepare? You're obedient. Luthien gestured for him to follow, his smile growing wider. Come, let me show you. The pair descended into a deeper chamber, where a crude table was covered in maps and diagrams of Nuln. Kresk's sharp eyes scanned the parchment, immediately recognizing the city's landmarks. He spotted the gunnery school, marked with a jagged X, and several other locations circled in red ink. Luthien said, pointing to the circles. Our key access points. Sewers, storage tunnels, forgotten entrances buried beneath the city. Our spies have been gathering information for months, learning the schedules of the guards, the locations of their supplies, the weaknesses in their defenses. Krask leaned over the table, his claws tracing one of the access points. His whiskers twitched as he examined the routes leading to the gunnery school. Not bad, but man-things are not blind stupid. They will guard-watch these paths, yes. You will need to strike quietly, move fast, quick. Luthien nodded. Precisely. That is where you come in, Krrask Thin-Tail. Your expertise in infiltration will be invaluable. You will scout the targets, confirm the information, and eliminate any obstacles that stand in our way. Krask bared his teeth in a sharp grin. Good. I will see what your spies have missed, overlooked. But know this, man-thinging, if your plan falls apart, I will not fail with you. I am not your weak, foolish pawn. Luthien chuckled, unbothered by the threat. Of course not, my friend. You are a dagger in the dark, and I trust you to wield yourself with precision. The sewers beneath the gunnery school were unlike the twisting, filth-choked tunnels Krask was used to. The air here was warmer, carrying the faint tang of soot and molten metal. The walls were reinforced with steel beams, and the occasional clanking of machinery echoed from above. Krask moved with practiced ease, his movements silent as he crept closer to one of the access points marked on the map. He emerged in a forgotten maintenance chamber, its walls lined with rusting pipes and unused tools. Above him he could hear the muffled voices of human workers and the rhythmic pounding of hammers. His tail swished behind him as he surveyed the area, his mind already piecing together a plan. From a small crack in the wall, Krask peered into the foundry. The sight before him was both impressive and infuriating. Humans scurried like ants, working tirelessly to produce their deadly war machines. Massive forges roared with fire, casting the entire chamber in a hellish glow. Engineers in soot-stained uniforms barked orders, while others meticulously assembled the parts of a massive cannon. Krask muttered to himself. Clever smart, but so full of pride, arrogance. They believe this will save them. His claws flexed against the stone as he observed the weak points in their operation. The forges were the lifeblood of the foundry. Destroying them would cripple production. The storage rooms stocked with gunpowder and raw materials were vulnerable to a single spark, and the humans themselves, though diligent, were soft and easily panicked. Krask grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the faint light. Yes, so many ways to break this place. The Night Lord will be pleased. Still, he couldn't help but feel a pang of annoyance as he watched the humans work. Their creations were crude compared to the wonders of Skryr engineering, but they were effective. Too effective. It grated on him to see man-things wielding such power, thinking themselves equal to the might of the Under-Empire. As Krask slipped back into the shadows, his mind raced with possibilities. The cult's plan might be foolish, but there was potential in their chaos. He would guide their efforts, bending them to serve the will of the Skaven. And when Nuln burned, it would not be the Dark Prince who claimed victory. It would be Clan Eshin, and Krrask Thin-Tail would be the shadow that toppled the mighty city of man-things. Chapter 5. A growing tension. The cult's hideout was as stifling as ever, a tangle of incense-heavy air, whispered prayers to the Dark Prince, and far too much man-thinging noise. Krask paced along the edges of the main chamber, his sharp claws clicking against the stone floor. His tail lashed in frustration as he surveyed the cultists bustling around the altar, preparing for yet another ritual that would likely end in pointless revelry and wasted energy. They are weak-idiot man-things, he thought bitterly. They prance, dance, and chant, but they do not know how to strike kill. His sharp gaze fell on Elren, who was nervously sorting through a pile of artifacts under Luthalien's watchful eye. The boy fumbled constantly, dropping a strange glowing orb onto the floor with a loud clatter. Krask's ears flattened, and he hissed audibly, drawing the attention of the surrounding cultists. "You should not be here, fool boy," Krrask muttered under his breath. "Weak, clumsy, slow, useless. XM spoke. They are useless." Elren glanced up at Krask, his pale cheeks flushing. He quickly averted his eyes, but not before Krask caught the strange flicker of something unsettling. It wasn't fear, though there was plenty of that. It was something else, something worse. Over the next few days, Krask began to notice it more and more. Elren's glances lingered too long. He would stammer nervously when Krask addressed him, his words stumbling over themselves like a rat caught in a trap. Krask's patience, already thin, began to fray further. On one such occasion, as Krask crouched in the shadows to observe a meeting between Luthane and his lieutenants, Elren approached him with hesitant, shuffling steps. "The Krrask," Elren began, his voice quivering. The assassin didn't even turn to look at him. "What do you want, man-thing?" he snapped, his tone sharp as his claws. Elren paused, his hands fidgeting nervously. I was just wondering." He trailed off, glancing at Krask's feet before quickly looking away. Krask's whiskers twitched and he narrowed his crimson eyes. "Spit out your nonsense, fool thing, before I make you regret beg for wasting my time." Your feet," Elren blurted out, his voice cracking. Krask froze. He turned slowly to face the boy, his claws flexing as his eyes glinted with dangerous curiosity. "What about my feet, man-thing?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. Elren swallowed hard, his face burning red. They're unique. I couldn't help but notice how, elegant they are." For a moment there was silence. Then Krrask's lips peeled back, revealing sharp, yellowed teeth in a snarl. His tail lashed behind him like a whip. "What nonsense foolishness is this?" he hissed, his claws scraping against the stone as he stepped toward Elren. "You dare speak to me like this?" Elven stumbled back, his hands raised defensively. I didn't mean to offend you, I swear. I don't know why I said that. Krask lunged forward, his claws stopping just short of Elren's throat. The boy froze, trembling under the assassin's burning glare. "You are weak, disgusting," Krask growled. "You think I care what you think. I should remove you now, save myself from your pathetic distractions." From across the chamber, Luthen's voice rang out. "Krask!" The assassin's ears twitched, but he didn't release Elren immediately. His claws lingered near the boy's neck, his tail twitching with irritation. Slowly he turned his head to see Luthen watching them, his expression calm but stern. "Do not waste your energy on petty grievances," Luthen said smoothly. "Elren is important to our work. Whatever misunderstandings you two have must be resolved. The Dark Prince values harmony among his servants." "Harmony," Krask spat, his voice dripping with venom. He released Elren, who stumbled backward and collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. Krask glared down at him. "This fool thing is no servant, he is a liability, weak, foolish, distracted." Luthen smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But even the weak have their uses. You, of all creatures, should understand that, Krrask." The assassin's fur bristled, but he said nothing. With a final glare at Elren, he turned and stalked off into the shadows, his tail whipping behind him. Later, as Krask prowled the tunnels alone, his mind churned with thoughts of the cult's incompetence. Elren was the worst of them, a jittery fool who couldn't even hold his tongue. And yet there was power there, undeniable and raw. Krask had seen it during the boy's outburst in the ritual chamber. If guided properly, or at least controlled, that power could be a valuable tool. But trust was dangerous. The boy's strange behavior, his foolish stammering, his bizarre fixation on Krask's appearance, it all grated on him. How could such a creature survive long enough to serve any purpose? Krask paused, his claws tapping against the stone wall as he considered his options. If Elren became a true liability, he would remove him without hesitation. But for now, the boy was Luthen's concern. And if the cult leader's plan faltered, Krask's lips curled into a cruel grin. If the plan failed, there would be plenty of time for Claw and Fang to settle accounts. For now, he would endure. But only just. Chapter 6. The Footpaw Confession. The hideout was unusually quiet, the muffled sounds of distant activity in Nuln serving as the only backdrop. Most of the cultists had retired to their quarters, or were engaged in private, blasphemous acts of devotion to their Dark Prince. Only Krask, Elren, and Luthen remained in the central chamber, poring over maps and diagrams of the Imperial Gunnery School. The air was heavy with tension. Krrask crouched low at the edge of the table, his claws tracing the route he had scouted earlier that day. His voice was sharp, snapping at Luthen with the usual mix of contempt and urgency. "You must strike at here," Krrask hissed, jabbing a claw at a particular spot on the map. "The weak, stupid man thinks God watched these gates, but their patrols are thin, near the eastern wall. It is the best pathlout. Do not fail botch this." Luthen nodded thoughtfully, stroking his chin. "A wise observation, Krask. The patrol schedules align with your assessment. We shall prepare for an assault within the week." From the corner of the chamber, Elren stood fidgeting, his arms crossed tightly as if trying to shrink into himself. His pale face was illuminated by the flickering torchlight, and his eyes darted nervously between Krask and the map. Krask's sharp ears caught every little sound the boy made, every shift of his feet, every nervous swallow. "How is he here?" Krask growled, not bothering to look at Elren. "He is no use, help." His hands shake, his mind stumbles, trips. "He will fail, ruin your precious plan." Elren flinched, but said nothing. Luthen, ever the diplomat, gave Krask a calm smile. "Elren's role is not yours to question, Krask. His talents are subtle but essential. You will see in time." Krask bared his teeth but said nothing more, instead returning his attention to the map. His tail swished behind him, betraying his simmering irritation. Elren, for his part, stood in silence for several moments, his eyes fixed on the floor. Then, to Krask's surprise, the boy took a hesitant step forward. "Krask," Elren said, his voice barely above a whisper. The assassin didn't look up. "What do you want, fool thing? Speak quickly, or I will not listen." Elren hesitated, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his robe. I just wanted to say—" His voice faltered, and his face turned crimson as he avoided Krrask's gaze. Krask's whiskers twitched. "Say what? Stop stammering, man-thing, or I will." "I think your feet are beautiful," Elren blurted out, the words tumbling from his mouth in a desperate rush. The chamber fell silent. Elren froze, his claws tightening against the stone table. Slowly his head turned toward Elren, his crimson eyes narrowing into slits. "What did you say? Speak." Elren looked like he wanted to crawl into the nearest hole and die. His hands waved in front of him as if trying to undo the words he had just spoken. I didn't mean, I just, your footpaws, they're so unique and elegant. I mean, compared to human feet, they're—" Krask lunged. The boy barely had time to yelp before Krask was on him, pinning him against the wall with a clawed hand at his throat. The assassin's teeth were bared in a snarl, and his tail lashed violently behind him. "You dare?" Krask spat, his voice a venomous hiss. "You disgusting, weak, foolish man-thing! How dare you say such things to me? I should gut-kill you for this insult." Elren squirmed, his hands clawing at Krask's grip as he gasped for air. His face was a mixture of terror and humiliation, and tears welled in his eyes as he choked out a strangled plea. I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Enough." Lutheran's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Krask froze, his claws still pressing against Elren's throat. Slowly he turned his head to glare at the cult leader. "Release him, Krask," Lafayette said, his tone firm but calm. "We cannot afford to lose him." Krask growled low in his throat, his fur bristling with barely contained fury. "This fool thing insults me. He speaks, says vile things, disgusting words. He is weak, useless." "And yet he is necessary," Lutheran interrupted, stepping closer. His expression was calm, but there was a dangerous edge to his voice. "You may not understand, Krask, but Elren's potential is invaluable. His connection to the Dark Prince is stronger than even he realizes. We need him." The assassin's claws tightened for a moment, his tail twitching violently. Then, with a snarl of frustration, he released Elren, who crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. Krask loomed over the boy, his crimson eyes blazing with contempt. "You are lucky, man-thing," he hissed. "The only reason you still live, breathe, is because of him." He jabbed a claw in Luthane's direction. "But if you say such things again, no one will stop me. Do you understand?" Elren nodded frantically, his face pale and tear-streaked. "Yes, I'm sorry, I won't—" "Silence," Krrask snapped, turning his back on the boy. Luthen placed a hand on Elren's shoulder, helping him to his feet. "You have much to learn, Elren," he said softly. "Control yourself and do not provoke Krask further. He is not as forgiving as I." Elren nodded, still trembling, and retreated to the far side of the chamber. Krask, meanwhile, returned to the table, his claws tapping against the stone as he tried to refocus on the map. His tail swished with agitation, and his mind churned with frustration. These man-things, he thought bitterly. Weak, disgusting, foolish. If not for the Night Lord's orders, I would kill them all and be done with it. But the mission came first. It always did. For now, he would endure. But Elren had made one thing abundantly clear. This alliance was only growing more unbearable by the day. Chapter 7. A Conversation in the Dark. The flickering torches in the cult's hideout had burned low, casting long shadows across the damp stone walls. Most of the cultists had retreated to their private quarters or disappeared into whatever hedonistic debauchery they indulged in when Luthien wasn't watching. The quiet was broken only by the faint drip of water in the distance. Krask sat perched on a crumbling ledge near the hideout's edge, his crimson eyes glinting in the darkness. His claws idly scraped at the stone beneath him, the repetitive motion a quiet outlet for his simmering frustration. Somewhere behind him, he could hear hesitant, shuffling footsteps. "The boy." "Elren," Krask hissed, not bothering to turn around. "Do not creep-sneak like that. I can hear your clumsy footfalls from the other end of the tunnel." The footsteps stopped abruptly, followed by a nervous cough. I didn't mean to disturb you." Krask's ears twitched, and he spun around, dropping from the ledge in one fluid motion. He loomed over the young cultist, his tail curling behind him like a serpent preparing to strike. "You are disturbing me simply by existing," Krask growled, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "Explain yourself, man-thing. Why do you speak such foolishness? Why do you fixate on nonsense, when you should think on survival?" Elren flinched under Krask's glare, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. I don't know," he stammered. "I can't explain it. It's just the way you move, the way you look. It's different. And after everything I've seen, I can't help but—" Krask snarled, his claws snapping up to silence the boy. "I do not care about your pathetic feeling thoughts. You think I am some thing to admire, a foolish object of your chaos-addled mind." Elren stepped back, his face pale but his expression oddly resolute. "It's not just about you," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "It's everything. Ever since I saw the vision Slaaneshi gave me, nothing makes sense anymore. What I thought I knew about the world, about what's right and wrong, it's all shattered." Krask tilted his head, his ears flicking as he regarded the boy with growing disdain. "Shattered? Foolishness. The world is simple, yes. Survival, power, cunning, that is all. If you do not understand that, you will fail. But that's the thing," Elren said, his voice rising. "The visions showed me things I'd never even imagined. They weren't just about pleasure or excess, they were about truth. I saw the lizard men of Lustria fighting for order and balance. I was raised to think of snakes and reptiles as symbols of chaos, of evil and darkness. But Slaaneshi showed me that the lizard men are protectors of light, harmony, and order." Krrask scoffed, his tail lashing behind him. "You think the old ones spawn are symbols of light? They are lizards, yes, but they kill, slaughter without thought. They care for no man-thing, no Skaven thing. If you met one, it would not care. Show mercy, it would kill. Break you without hesitation." Elren shook his head. "But they were fighting chaos. They were fighting us. Doesn't that mean something? Doesn't it make you wonder if everything we've been taught is wrong?" Krask hissed, stepping closer until his sharp teeth were inches from Elren's face. "Do not speak to me of wonder, man-thinging. I do not care about your fragile morality or your fool thoughts of light and dark. Skaven do not care for such things. We survive because we must. Because the world is cruel, and death waits for the weak." Elren faltered, his gaze dropping to the floor. Maybe you're right, he murmured. Maybe I am weak. But if that's true, why did Slaanesh choose me? Why did he show me these visions? Krask's claws flexed, scraping against the stone as he fought the urge to silence the boy permanently. Chosen? Bah, you are not chosen, man-thing. You are a tool, a puppet thing. Your dark prince uses you just as the horned rat uses us all. That is the truth of this world. The strong use the weak, and the weak die. Dabarek break. Elren looked up, his eyes glinting with defiance. Then what about you, Krask? If that's all there is, why do you fight? What keeps you alive? For a moment, Krask was silent, his crimson eyes boring into Elren's. Then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. I fight because I was born in the filth muck of Skaven blight, where only the cunning survive. I fight because I learned as a whelp, that hesitation means death. You think you know pain? You think you know survival? You know nothing, man-thing. Elren swallowed hard, but he didn't back down. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't know anything. But I want to understand. I want to survive, just like you. Krask straightened, his tail flicking irritably. You will not survive, fool thing. Not unless you stop thinking, dreaming, and start learning, fighting. The world is not a vision, it is a blade, and it will cut you apart if you are not sharp. With that, Krrask turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Elren standing alone in the dim chamber. The boy stared after him, his thoughts a tangle of fear, confusion, and reluctant admiration. In the darkness, Krask's mind churned with irritation. The boy was a liability, yes, but perhaps there was a spark of something useful in him. If only the fool thing could learn to think like a survivor instead of clinging to his pathetic dreams. Perhaps. But Krask wasn't about to waste energy on hope. Hope, after all, was a luxury for the weak. Chapter 8 of Snakes and Survival. The hideout's air was heavy with the sickly sweet aroma of incense. The cult's rituals had concluded for the night, leaving behind only the dim glow of dying torches and a suffocating silence. Krask lingered in the shadows of a side chamber, his claws idly scratching against the stone as he sharpened a jagged dagger. The rhythmic scrape echoed softly, soothing his ever-tense nerves. From the tunnel behind him came the hesitant sound of footsteps, soft, uneven, familiar. Elren, Krask hissed without turning. You slink, creep like a sick-wounded rat. Speak, tell me why you bother. Annoy me again. Elren stopped a few paces away, his hands ringing nervously as he stood at the threshold. I didn't mean to disturb you, he said quickly. I wanted to share something, a vision I had. Krask flicked his tail dismissively, not bothering to look at the boy. A vision, yes, more of your dark prince's fool dreams. I do not want to hear them. I think you will care about this one, Elren pressed, his voice trembling but insistent. Krask's claws paused mid-scrape. His ears twitched and he turned his head slightly, one crimson eye glinting in the low light. Fine, speak, say your nonsense, man-thing. Waste my time. Elren took a deep breath, steadying himself. In the vision, Slaaneshi appeared to me as a great serpent, he began. Its scales shimmered like precious jewels, and its voice was beautiful, soothing. It spoke to me of balance, of harmony, of the natural order. It showed me the lizard men of Lustria, mighty warriors, protectors of their land. They fought to preserve the world against chaos, against destruction. I saw them standing tall, their eyes fierce, their weapons shining with divine power. They weren't the monsters I was taught to fear. They were... He hesitated, searching for the right word. Righteous. Krask's lips curled back in a sneer, exposing his sharp, yellowed teeth. Righteous. Foolish, foolish man-thing. You see images, and you think them truth? Do you believe? Dream this vision was real? Elren bristled slightly, his voice gaining a flicker of strength. It felt real. Slaaneshi was showing me something I needed to see. The lizard men weren't just warriors, they were guardians, protectors of the world's order. Krask's laugh was harsh and guttural, a chittering sound that echoed off the chamber walls. Guardians? Protectors? You are blind stupid like all man-things. The lizard men do not care for order, not as you think. They fight because they are slaves, servants to their old ones. They protect nothing but their own survival, their own nests. Elren frowned, confused. But they fought chaos in the vision. They opposed the gods of destruction. Isn't that a kind of order? Krask spat on the ground, his claws flexing. Order? Bah! Order is nothing but another lie. The lizard men do not fight chaos for your man-thing order. They fight because they are trapped, stuck in their master's plans, schemes. Just as we Skaven fight for the horned rat. They kill because it is their nature, just as it is mine. Elren hesitated, then stepped closer, his voice growing more curious. And snakes? What about the serpent in my vision? Slaaneshi took that form for a reason. Don't you see snakes as cunning, powerful, wise? Krask let out a sharp hiss, his tail whipping against the stone. Snakes are survivors, he said flatly. They slink-eyed in the dark, strike kill with poison. Yes, they are cunning. But they are not wise, not powerful. They are weak things, alone, clawing, biting just to live. They do not care for visions or gods. They care only for their next kill. Strike. Elren's brow furrowed. But isn't there something admirable about that? About surviving, no matter the odds? For a moment, Krask was silent, his crimson eyes boring into Elren's with an intensity that made the boy flinch. Then he let out a low, chittering laugh. Ha. Perhaps, yes, Krask admitted, his tone laced with mockery. Survival is all that matters, after all. But you, man-thinging, do not understand. You think you can admire a snake without becoming one. You dream of balance, harmony, foolishness. The world is no vision. It is sharp teeth and poison, and those who do not strike first are struck down. Elren looked down, his shoulders slumping slightly. I don't think the world has to be like that, he said quietly. Krask's laugh was sharp and cruel. Then you will die, man-thing. The weak always do. He turned away, stalking back into the shadows, his claws clicking against the stone. Elren remained where he stood, his thoughts a whirl of confusion and frustration. Krask's voice drifted back to him, low and venomous. Dream your snake dreams if you must, Elren. But remember, know this. Snakes care only for their own skin, just like me. And with that the shadows swallowed him, leaving Elren alone to ponder the weight of the assassin's words. Chapter 9. The Nature of Chaos. The torchlight flickered weakly in the cramped chamber, casting jagged shadows on the uneven stone walls. Krask crouched low on a crumbling pillar, his tail coiled tightly beneath him, like a spring ready to snap. His claws clicked softly against the stone as he sharpened a blade, the sound rhythmic and deliberate. Across the room, Elren sat cross-legged on the floor, his shoulders slouched, but his eyes restless. The silence hung between them like a taut thread, fraying with every passing moment. Krask was content to let it linger. Silence was preferable to the endless drivel of man-things, but Elren, as always, was unable to keep his thoughts to himself. Krask, Elren began, hesitantly, but with a spark of determination. What now, man-thing? Krask hissed, not bothering to look up. His claws moved methodically, scraping the blade to a razor edge. More of your fool questions. Your pathetic dreams of harmony. Voiceover now, man-thing? Okay, I'm going to offer you a full recovery. Elren flinched at the jab but pressed on. I've been thinking about chaos, he said slowly, about what it really means. You call my devotion to Slaanesh weak, but is it really any different from your loyalty to Clan Eshin? Krrask froze, mid-swipe. His crimson eyes snapped toward Elren, narrowing into dangerous slits. What are you saying, suggesting, man-thing? He hissed. Speak carefully or I will break your tongue for daring such words. Elren held up his hands defensively. I'm not trying to insult you, I'm just curious. You called me a servant, a puppet, but aren't you the same? You follow the Night Lord, the Council of 13, the Horn Rat. They give you orders, and you obey. How is that any different from me serving Slaanesh? Krask's tail lashed violently, striking the stone floor with a sharp crack. He leapt from his perch, landing a mere breath away from Elren, his sharp teeth bared in a snarl. You dare compare me to you? He spat, his claws flexing. You think my service is the same as your blind, stupid devotion? I serve because I choose, decide to. Clan Eshin is strength, power. The Horned Rat is cunning, always scheming. We Skaven fight claw for survival. You, man-thinking, grovel and whimper to your dark prince, begging for scraps of pleasure. There is no comparison. Elren held his ground, though his hands trembled slightly. But you're still following someone else's orders, he countered. You fight for survival, yes, but isn't that just another kind of devotion, a kind of servitude? Krask's claws twitched, but he didn't strike. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, his tail swishing with irritation. You twist-turn words, man-thing. Clever, yes, but wrong. My loyalty is not blind stupid like yours. The Horned Rat rewards cunning, strength. Those who fail die are meant to fail die. There is no mercy, no softness, only survival. And Slaanesh is any different. Elren shot back, emboldened. You think he doesn't reward strength in his own way? He doesn't cull the weak from the strong? You look at my devotion and see weakness, but it's not so simple. Slaanesh showed me things I never would have understood on my own. He gave me power, gave me... Harrick let out a sharp, chittering laugh, his teeth glinting in the dim light. Purpose? Ha! You think chaos gives purpose? Foolish, blind, stupid man-thing. Chaos does not care. Help. Chaos takes. Use. The Horned Rat, your Slaanesh, they are the same, yes. They care only for themselves, their power. You and I are nothing but pawns, tools for their games. Elren blinked, startled by the sudden venom in Krask's tone. Then why serve at all, he asked softly. Why fight for a god who doesn't care about you? Krask's tail froze mid-swing, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he leaned closer, his crimson eyes boring into Elren's with an intensity that made the boy shiver. Because there is no choice, Krask hissed. The Horned Rat is everything, everywhere. He is the hunger in our bellies, the whispers in the dark. To serve is to survive. To disobey is to die. Break, forgotten in the shadows. Elren swallowed hard, his expression a mixture of fear and fascination. But don't you ever want more than that? More than just survival? Krask laughed again, a cruel, chittering sound that echoed off the stone walls. More? Ha! Only a man-thing could think of such nonsense. There is no more, fool thing. There is only survival, power, and cunning. Anything else is a lie, falsehood. You cling hold to your visions, your purpose, because you are too weak scared to face the truth. Elren looked down, his fists clenching at his sides. Maybe you're right, he murmured. Maybe I am weak. But at least I have something to believe in. At least I'm fighting for more than just myself. Krask hissed sharply, his claws scraping against the stone. Fighting for yourself is the only fight that matters, remember. Learn that, man-thinging, or you will die, fail like all the rest. With that, Krask turned and slinked back into the shadows, his tail flicking dismissively behind him. Elren remained where he was, staring at the ground, his thoughts a tangled mess of doubt and defiance. Krask's words stung, but they also revealed a truth he couldn't ignore. Both of them were pawns in the games of greater powers. The difference, Elren realized, was that Krask had accepted his role, while he still clung to the hope that he could shape his own destiny. But hope, as Krask had said, was a luxury for the weak, and Elren wasn't sure if he was strong enough to let it go. Chapter 10. A Fractured Alliance. The hideout reeked of incense and decay, a stagnant mix of Slaaneshi indulgence and human incompetence that made Krask's fur bristle with irritation. The cultists scurried about like clumsy prey, preparing for yet another ritual. Another waste of time. Krask crouched in the shadows of a crumbling alcove, his sharp crimson eyes narrowing as he watched their disorganized chaos unfold. For days now the cult had wallowed in their rituals, their plotting, bogged down by incessant distractions. They danced, they chanted, they whispered sweet nonsense to their dark prince, but they had made no meaningful progress toward their supposed goal, the destruction of the Imperial Gunnery School. Fools, all of them, Krask muttered under his breath. His claws flexed against the stone, his tail flicking in frustration. Weak, stupid man-things. They worship sing, but they do not strike kill. They waste time while the city stands strong. Across the chamber, Luthien presided over the proceedings with his usual flair, his silken robes flowing as he gave instructions in his melodic, almost hypnotic voice. The cult leader was charismatic, yes, but Krask had begun to see through the man-thing's facade. Luthien spoke much but accomplished little. His plans were grand in scope, but lacked the precision and ruthlessness required for success. Kvas's patience, already thin, was wearing down to the bone. That night, as the cultists performed yet another of their endless rituals, Krask slinked through the shadows of their hideout, his movements silent and precise. He had already memorized the layout of the chambers, the locations of their supplies, and the hidden entrances and exits. He had observed the cultists' routines, their weaknesses, their blind spots. It was time to act. His first target was a cache of alchemical powders the cultists had prepared for their sabotage attempts. The powders were potent and volatile, perfect for causing destruction, but only if used correctly. Krask crouched over the stash, his claws carefully adjusting the mixtures. He altered the ratios subtly, ensuring that any attempt to use the powders would result in misfires or premature detonations. "Let them fail, break on their own," Krask whispered to himself. "Blame themselves, not me." Next he slinked toward the ritual chamber, where the cultists stored their enchanted trinkets and relics. These objects were meant to enhance their spells and amplify their connection to Slaanesh, but Krask saw them as liabilities. With delicate precision, he shifted several of the artifacts, misaligning their placements and weakening their magical resonance. The changes were subtle enough that the cultists wouldn't notice until it was too late. "Let your dark prince watch as you fumble fail," Krask thought, his lips curling into a cruel grin. The sabotage continued over the next few days. Krask disrupted communication between the cult's informants, ensuring that critical messages were delayed or lost entirely. He tampered with their maps and plans, introducing errors that would lead them to wrong conclusions about the city's defenses. All the while he maintained his role as their reluctant ally, pretending to offer advice and guidance when needed. Luthien, ever the egotist, remained oblivious to Krask's interference. He continued to preach grand visions of their eventual triumph, rallying his cultists with promises of glory and favor from Slaanesh. Krask watched it all with thinly veiled contempt. But Elren was different. The boy, though foolish and naive, had begun to notice the cracks forming in their alliance. He watched Krask with suspicion, his pale face often creased with worry as he observed the assassin's movements. One evening, as Krask slunk back into the hideout after another round of sabotage, He found Elren waiting for him in the shadows of the main chamber. "You've been busy," Elren said, his voice low but firm. Krask froze, his tail swishing lazily behind him. "Busy, yes, yes," he said with a sneer. "More busy than your slow, weak cult. At least I act due, unlike you." Elren stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I know what you're doing, Krask. The others might not see it, but I do. You're sabotaging us. Why?" Krask bared his teeth in a sharp grin. "Ha, so the boy thing has eyes. Clever, clever, yes, but you do not understand know what you see." "Then explain it to me," Elren demanded. "You're supposed to be helping us, but all you've done is sow chaos among us. Why?" Krask's grin faded, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. He stepped closer to Elren, his crimson eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Because your planned scheme is weak," he hissed. "Your cult is weak. You sing-dance for your dark prince, but you do not strike, kill. If I leave, follow your path, it will fail, break, and none will stand strong. That cannot happen." Elren frowned, his brow furrowing. "You're trying to take control, aren't you? You're bending this mission to serve your own goals." Krask laughed sharply, his tail snapping against the stone. "Yes, yes, of course. Why should I trust your foolish cult? Why should I follow your weak leader? The Night Lord sent me to break this city, and I will do it my way. Your way is too slow, too soft." Elren's fists clenched at his sides. "You don't care about anyone but yourself," he said bitterly. "Not your clan, not your god, just you." Krask leaned in closer, his sharp teeth glinting. "Yes, yes," he hissed, "because that is how you survive. Live man-thing, trust no one, care for no one. The strong survive and the weak die. Your cult will die break too if you do not learn this truth." Elren's expression hardened, but he said nothing. Krask stepped back, his tail flicking dismissively. "Stay out of my way, man-thing," Krask said coldly. "Your cult's failure is coming, yes, yes, but I will succeed." And with that the assassin disappeared into the shadows, leaving Elren alone with his thoughts, his faith in both Slaanesh and their mission shaken more than ever. Chapter 11. Visions of Failure. The candlelight in Elren's small chamber flickered erratically, casting distorted shadows that danced along the cracked walls. The air felt heavier than usual, laden with an unnatural stillness that clawed at the edges of Elren's sanity. He sat on the cold stone floor, his knees drawn to his chest, trying to steady his breathing. But the visions would not leave him. They had begun as whispers in the dark, faint echoes of promises and warnings. But now they came unbidden, like a deluge of horrors pouring into his mind. His heart raced as he clutched a small, tarnished amulet dedicated to Slaanesh, hoping it might bring some form of comfort. Instead, the visions surged again, vivid and overwhelming. In his mind's eye, he saw himself standing in the ruins of the cult's hideout. Fire consumed the walls, and the bodies of his fellow cultists lay scattered, their faces frozen in twisted expressions of agony. He saw Luthen, impaled on a spear of jagged metal, his silken robes drenched in blood. And then there was himself, alone, trembling, a dagger in his trembling hand as the shadows closed in around him. A pair of red, gleaming eyes emerged from the darkness, followed by a voice that hissed like a blade drawn across stone. "You've failed, big man-thing. You are weak, slow, foolish. Your life is nothing but a squeak in the dark, soon to be silenced." The vision shifted, and Elren saw himself on the streets of Nuln, pursued by faceless figures clad in the garb of witch hunters. They screamed accusations of heresy, their torches and blades a beacon of judgment. His legs gave out beneath him, and as he fell to the cobblestones, he felt their steel bite into his flesh. Elren jolted awake, gasping for air. His hands trembled violently as he pressed them against his temples, trying to banish the lingering images, but they clung to him, whispering of his inevitable demise. He couldn't do this alone. He needed guidance, protection, someone who could help him survive this nightmare. And as much as he hated to admit it, only one figure came to mind. Elren found Krask in the main chamber of the hideout, crouched atop a narrow beam that stretched across the ceiling. The Skaven was meticulously cleaning his blades, his crimson eyes glinting like embers in the low light. His tail swayed lazily beneath him, a sharp contrast to the tension that seemed to radiate from his entire man-thing. Krask hissed, without looking up. "Why are you here? What do you want?" "Want." The man kicked over the rock and faced them. Elren hesitated, wringing his hands as he stepped closer. I need to talk to you, Krask." The assassin let out an irritated chitter, his claws scraping against the metal of his blade. "More fool words? Speak quickly or leave. Go." Elren took a shaky breath, his voice quivering as he spoke. "I've been having visions, horrible visions of failure, of my death. I see the cult destroyed, the city in flames, and myself dead," Krask finished, his tone flat and devoid of sympathy. He finally glanced down at Elren, his gaze cold and calculating. Yes, that is the way of things. Weak things die, foolish things fail, break. Why do you speak this to me? "Because I don't know what to do," Elren blurted out, his voice cracking. "These visions, they feel so real. I can't sleep, I can't think, and every time I see them I realize how weak I really am." Krask let out a low, chittering laugh, his sharp teeth glinting as he grinned. "Ha! So you finally know the truth, man-thing. You are weak, yes, weak and afraid. You are not fit to survive in this world." Elren flinched but refused to back down. "Maybe I am weak, but I want to survive, and you know how to survive. You've lived through things I can't even imagine. Please, Krask, teach me. Help me." Krask leapt down from the beam, landing in front of Elren with a soft thud. He loomed over the boy, his tail lashing behind him as his crimson eyes burned with disdain. "Teach you? Help you?" he hissed. "You think I have time to waste on your pathetic squeaking? I have my own plans, schemes to see through. You are nothing to me." Elren's hands clenched into fists, his fear momentarily giving way to desperation. "But if I fail, the cult fails. If the cult fails, your mission fails. Isn't that reason enough to help me?" Krask froze, his tail twitching sharply as he considered the boy's words. He hated to admit it, but Elren was right. As much as he despised the man-thing's weakness, his failure would complicate things. The Night Lord would not tolerate excuses, and Krask's own survival depended on the success of this mission. With an irritated growl, Krask jabbed a claw at Elren's chest, forcing the boy to take a step back. "Fine man-thinking," he spat. "I will teach you, show you, but not because I care. You are a tool, nothing more. Tools must be sharp, useful, or they are discarded, thrown away. Understand?" Elren nodded quickly, relief washing over his face. "I understand. Thank you, Krask. Stop talking," Krask snapped, his voice sharp as a blade. "Do not thank me. Do not trust me. You will follow my words exactly, or you will die, Brag. This is your last chance, man-thing. Do not fail." Elren swallowed hard but nodded again, his resolve hardening. He knew the road ahead would be brutal, but he had no other choice. Krask turned away, his tail flicking dismissively as he disappeared into the shadows. "Foolish man-thing," he muttered to himself. "If he cannot learn fast, I will have to end with him myself. Weakness is a sickness, and I will not let it spread." Elren watched him go, a mixture of fear and determination swirling in his chest. The visions of failure still haunted him, but now, for the first time, he felt a sliver of hope. even if that hope came from a creature as merciless as Krask. Chapter 12. The Sabotage Begins. Nuln was a city of clamor and industry, its forges and workshops filling the air with the sounds of hammering steel and the acrid tang of molten metal. The sprawling streets bustled with merchants, engineers, and soldiers, their movements driven by the Empire's insatiable hunger for progress and power. But beneath this facade of order, chaos was beginning to seep into the cracks, and Krrask Thin-Tail was the one wielding the knife. The Skaven assassin moved like a shadow through the city's underbelly. The sewers beneath Nuln were a sprawling labyrinth, long neglected by the humans who thought themselves too clever, too mighty to fear what lurked below. Krask knew better. These tunnels were his domain, his hunting ground, and the hunt had begun. The first strike. Krask's first target was an influential guildmaster, a man-thing who oversaw the supply lines feeding the Imperial Gunnery School. The guildmaster's office was a fortress of wood and stone, but human arrogance made it porous. Late at night, when the guildmaster thought himself safe behind locked doors, Krask emerged from the shadows of his private study. The kill was swift. Krask's dagger found its mark with ruthless efficiency, sliding between the man's ribs before he could scream. Blood pooled on the polished floor as the guildmaster slumped over his desk, his final breath escaping in a wet gurgle. Krask wiped his blade clean on the dead man's fine coat, his crimson eyes scanning the room for the next phase of his plan. From his pouch, he retrieved a small medallion marked with the sigil of a rival merchant faction. He placed it carefully in the dead man's hand, ensuring the scene looked like an assassination orchestrated by human rivals. And then struck. The next morning, Nuln's streets buzzed with outrage and suspicion as accusations flew between the city's powerful guilds. Krask, watching from the shadows, allowed himself a satisfied chitter. The man-things would tear themselves apart, leaving their defenses weakened for what was to come. The rituals in the dark. While Krask spread discord above, Elren's task was to prepare the magical artifacts provided by the cult. These objects were imbued with chaotic energies meant to destabilize the city further, spreading fear and confusion among its inhabitants. Elren's role was simple, in theory: plant the artifacts in key locations, ensuring their activation during critical moments. But the reality was far more taxing. The artifacts whispered to him. They spoke in the voices of the damned, their words laced with promises of power and torment. When he held them, he felt their chaotic energy seep into his skin, his mind, his soul. Each time he placed one of the cursed objects, he felt a piece of himself slip further into the void. One such artifact was a small, jagged shard of crystal that pulsed with an unnatural violet glow. Elren was tasked with planting it beneath a barracks near the gunnery school, where its energy would corrupt the minds of the soldiers stationed there. As he crept through the darkened streets, the shard throbbed in his hand, its whispers growing louder with every step. "Do it," the voices hissed. "Release us. Watch them fall to madness. You are chosen." Elren's breath came in shallow gasps as he crouched beneath the barracks, his trembling hands digging a small hole in the packed dirt floor. The shard felt heavier with every passing moment, its chaotic presence gnawing at his sanity. By the time he buried it and stumbled away, he was shaking violently, his mind a cacophony of doubt and fear. When he returned to the hideout, Krask was waiting for him, crouched atop a beam in the main chamber. The Skaven's crimson eyes gleamed as they fixed on Elren, who looked pale and exhausted. "You are slow, men think," Krask hissed. "Weak. Pathetic. Did you place the artifact? Or did you fail break as I expected?" "It's done," Elren said hoarsely, his hands trembling at his sides. "But it's getting harder. The artifacts, they're alive. They speak to me." Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh, his tail curling with disdain. "Ha ha! Fool thing. Of course they speak. Chaos does not whisper softly, it bites, claws at the mind. If you are too weak to hold stand, then die. Break and be done with it. Elren's fists clenched, his pale face flushed with frustration. "I'm not weak," he snapped. "I'm still here, aren't I?" "Barely." Krask sneered, leaping down from his perch to loom over Elren. "You are cracking, man, think your mind shatters like glass. If you falter, fail, I will not save you." Elren glared up at the Skaven, his fear giving way to a spark of defiance. "And what about you, Krask? You think you're so strong, so above it all. But you're a pawn, just like me. You're following orders, just like me. Don't act like you're any different." For a moment, Krrask said nothing, his crimson eyes narrowing as he studied the boy. Then he leaned in closer, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "Perhaps, man-thing," he hissed, "but I live because I do not break, crack under the weight of chaos. I bend it to my will. You are still its slave." With that, Krask turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Elren standing alone in the dim chamber. The boy clenched his fists, his mind reeling from the encounter. He wanted to believe he was stronger than Krask claimed, but the artifact's whispers still echoed in his ears, mocking his resolve. The ripples of sabotage. As the days passed, Krask's assassinations and sabotage plunged Nuln into chaos. Guilds turned on one another, soldiers grew paranoid and unstable, and the city's leaders scrambled to maintain order. The cult's efforts, though clumsy, added fuel to the fire, with Elren's planted artifacts causing bursts of madness and violence in Kilo. But the cracks in their alliance were growing wider. Krask's disdain for the cultists deepened with every passing day, while Elren's mental state continued to deteriorate under the strain of his tasks. The stage was set for Nuln's fall, but it was clear that their fragile alliance was teetering on the edge of collapse. For Krask, it was only a matter of time before the man-things became more trouble than they were worth, and when that time came, he would ensure that their failure served his purpose, no matter the cost. Chapter 13. An unexpected encounter. The moon hung low over Nuln, casting its pale glow across the city's rooftops and alleys. Beneath the cobbled streets, the sewers bubbled with foul runoff, carrying the stench of decay and industry. Krask led the way through the tunnels, his movements silent and precise, his sharp crimson eyes glinting in the darkness. Behind him, Elren struggled to keep up, his boots splashing in the muck as he clutched a bundle of enchanted tools wrapped in cloth. "Keep quiet, silence, man-thing," Krask hissed over his shoulder, his tail flicking irritably. "Your clumsy footsteps will bring the entire city down on us." "I'm doing my best," Elren muttered, his voice shaky. His nerves were already frayed from the artifact's whispers, which had grown louder as they neared their destination, a storage depot beneath one of the city's smaller armories. "Peely." Krask stopped abruptly, raising a clawed hand to signal silence. Elren froze, his breath catching in his throat as he strained to listen. From up ahead came the faint sound of voices, low and harsh, cutting through the steady drip of water. The assassin's ears twitched as he crouched low, motioning for Elren to do the same. "Men-things above," Krask whispered. "Guards, maybe. Or worse." Elren's stomach churned. Krask shot him a sharp look, his teeth bared in a snarl. "Witch hunters," he spat. "Feel the stink of them in the air. Be ready to act. Run, man-thing, or you will die." Break the encounter. The pair crept closer, following the sound of the voices to a grated access point that opened into the depot above. Krask peered through the bars, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. 3 witch hunters stood in the center of the room, their dark coats and broad-brimmed hats marked with the sigils of Sigmar. They carried torches and steel-tipped crossbows, their expressions grim and their movements purposeful. "More chaos-filled," one of them growled, nudging a shattered crate with his boot. The stench of it is everywhere in this city." Another witch hunter, a woman with a scar running down her cheek, pointed to the ground where faint, glowing symbols had been etched into the stone. "The cult's work," she said. "They're preparing something big." Krask's claws tightened around the bars as he listened. The witch hunters were dangerously close to uncovering the cult's sabotage efforts. If they pieced everything together, the entire operation could be compromised. Elren, crouched beside Krask, swallowed hard. "What do we do?" he whispered. Krrask's tail lashed behind him as he considered his options. "I act kill," he hissed. "You stay silent still. Do not move, fumble, or you will ruin. Break everything." Before Elren could respond, Krask slipped through the grate with the fluid grace of a shadow. The witch hunters, focused on their investigation, didn't notice him until it was too late. The first strike was swift and silent. Krask's dagger sank into the throat of the nearest witch hunter, his body collapsing to the floor without a sound. The other two turned, their eyes widening in alarm as the assassin lunged toward them. "Skaven!" the woman shouted, raising her crossbow. Krask darted to the side, moving faster than the human eye could follow. The bolt hissed past him, embedding itself in a wooden beam as he closed the distance. His claws raked across the woman's arm, forcing her to drop her weapon. The remaining witch hunter lunged at Krask with a sword, but the assassin ducked low, his tail sweeping out to trip the man. The Skaven's dagger flashed again, finding its mark in the human's chest. The woman, clutching her bleeding arm, scrambled for another weapon. Before she could reach it, Krask pounced, pinning her to the ground with a snarl. His claws hovered inches from her throat, ready to deliver the killing blow. But before he could strike, a panicked cry rang out. "Krask, look out!" The assassin turned just in time to see a fourth witch hunter emerge from the shadows, his blade arcing toward Krask's exposed back. The blow would have landed if not for Elren, who flung one of the enchanted tools in desperation. The object struck the witch hunter's chest and exploded in a burst of chaotic energy, sending the man. Krask snarled, his tail whipping violently as he spun on Elren. "Foolthink, you gave us away!" "I saved you," Elren shot back, his voice trembling. Krask didn't respond. Instead, he finished off the remaining witch hunter with a swift thrust of his dagger before stalking toward Elren. The boy backed away, his heart pounding as the Skaven loomed over him, crimson eyes blazing with fury. "You're reckless, stupid," Krask hissed, his claws flexing. "You almost broke everything. If you had not thrown that cursed thing properly, we would both be dead." Elren clenched his fists, his fear giving way to frustration. "I didn't see you stopping that witch hunter. Maybe if you weren't so arrogant, you'd realize you're not invincible." Krask froze, his tail snapping to the side like a whip. For a moment the two stared at each other, the tension between them thick and crackling. Finally Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh. "Ha ha! Bold words for a weak, scared man-thing. But you are right, yes. You saved my life this time." He leaned in closer, his teeth glinting in the torchlight. "Do not believe it makes you strong. You are still weak, still foolish. Do not depend on luck again, or you will die break for certain." Elren swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I understand." Krask snorted, his tail flicking as he turned away. "Good. Now come, man-thinging. We must move. Hide before more of them come." Elren followed in silence, his heart still racing as he processed what had just happened. The witch hunters were a reminder of how precarious their mission was, and how much he still had to learn. For Krask, the encounter was a bitter reminder of why he worked alone. The boys' foolishness had nearly cost them both their lives, and Krask's patience was wearing thin. But for now, Elren was still useful, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Chapter 14. The Truth Unveiled. The dimly lit tunnels beneath Nuln pulsed with a sense of urgency, as though the stone itself could feel the growing tension within the cult. Krrask Thin-Tail moved silently through the shadows, his claws barely making a sound against the damp stone floor. His tail flicked in irritation as he made his way toward the chamber where Luthanen was holding yet another of his private meetings. The Skaven assassin had grown increasingly suspicious of the cult leader's intentions, and tonight he intended to confirm his suspicions. Krask melted into the shadows just outside the chamber, his ears twitching as he caught the low murmur of voices. Luthaen's smooth, melodic tone carried through the heavy air, but the content of his words made Krask's fur bristle. Once the gunnery school falls and the city descends into chaos, the Skaven will no longer be of use to us, Luthaen said, his voice laced with confidence. Their arrogance blinds them to the fact that they are merely pawns in our greater game. Slaanesh's will is all that matters. Another voice responded, gruff and conspiratorial. What of the assassin, the one they sent? He's dangerous, if he suspects. Luthaen chuckled, a sound that grated on Krusk's nerves. He suspects nothing. The Skaven are cunning, yes, but they are also predictable. Once the task is complete, we will ensure he is dealt with. Chaos will have no room for their kind in our new world. Krask's claws dug into the stone as his crimson eyes narrowed. Betrayal. He had anticipated as much from the man-things, but to hear it confirmed stoked a fire of rage deep within him. The assassin's mind raced, already calculating how best to turn this treachery to his advantage. As Krask prepared to slip away, a faint rustling behind him made his ears twitch. He turned his head slightly, his sharp gaze catching a familiar figure crouching in the shadows. Elren. The boy's face was pale, his wide eyes fixed on the chamber where Luthaen continued to speak. He hadn't noticed Krask yet, too absorbed in the weight of what he was overhearing. Krask's tail lashed silently as he considered his options. The boy could ruin everything if he made a sound, but his presence here was curious. The crisis of faith. When Luthaen's meeting ended and the voices faded into the distance, Krask emerged from the shadows, his claws clicking softly against the stone. Elren jumped, his hand flying to the dagger at his belt, but he froze when he saw the assassin. Rask whispered, his voice trembling. You heard it too, didn't you? The Skaven loomed over him, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim torchlight. Yes, I heard. The man-thing leader plots schemes against us. He thinks himself clever. Smart. Elren swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he lowered his dagger. They plan to betray you, and maybe me too. Krask tilted his head, his ears twitching as he studied the boy. You sound shake as if surprised. Did you think your cult leader was loyal? True? Foolish man thing. All things in chaos betray. Turn, it is the way. Elren's gaze dropped to the ground, his shoulders slumping. But, Luthaen spoke for Slaanesh, I believed him. I thought what we were doing had meaning, that it was all part of the Dark Prince's plan. Now I don't know. Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh. Plan. Slaanesh has no plan, fool thing. Your god desires only indulgence. Chaos madness. You are not chosen. You are used, just as we all are. Elren looked up at Krask, his expression torn between anger and despair. And what about you, Krask? You follow the horned rat, don't you? Aren't you just as much of a pawn as I am? The assassin's crimson eyes narrowed, his tail lashing behind him. Yes, I serve the horned rat, but I understand what I am. I survive because I am cunning, sharp. I trust no one, depend on no one. That is the difference, man-thing. You cling to faith, to dreams. I cling only to survival. Elren's fists clenched at his sides. But what's the point of surviving if you have nothing to believe in? No purpose, no goal, just survival for the sake of it. That's not living. That's existing. Krask bared his teeth in a sneer, stepping closer to the boy. Living is existing, fool, thing. You think the world cares for purpose. It does not. The strong survive, the weak die, da-da-da-da-da. That is all. Elren looked away, his face pale and drawn. The weight of Luthaen's betrayal pressed heavily on him, and Krask's words only made it worse. For the first time, he questioned everything he had fought for, everything he had believed. Was he truly nothing more than a pawn in a game he couldn't even comprehend? The seeds of doubt. Krask watched Elren carefully, his sharp mind already considering how this new development could be exploited. The boy was broken, teetering on the edge of despair. He could prove useful in destabilizing the cult further, or he could become a liability if his weakness consumed him. "Listen. Here, man, think," Krask hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Your cult is doomed, yes, yes. Your leader plots schemes, but he is a fool. If you want to live, survive, you will follow me, not him." Elren blinked, his gaze snapping back to Krask. "Follow you? Why should I trust you? You've made it clear you don't care about me or anyone else." "Trust, ha, foolish lute, think again, man thing," Krrask spat. "Do not trust me. Trust your own fear, your own need to survive. Live. Follow me, and you may live. Follow Luthaen, and you will die. Break like the rest of your weak cult." Elren hesitated, the conflict clear in his eyes. Krask could see the boy's mind churning, the foundation of his beliefs crumbling under the weight of doubt. "Choose to side quickly, man thing," Krask growled, turning away. "Chaos does not wait pause for the weak, follow or be left behind." As Krask disappeared into the shadows, Elren stood alone, his thoughts a tangled mess of fear, betrayal, and uncertainty. For the first time, he wasn't sure where his loyalties lay, or whether they even mattered at all. Chapter 15. The Betrayal. The ritual chamber glowed with an unnatural light, the flickering candles and swirling auras of the cult's artifacts painting the stone walls in hues of sickly pink and violet. The air was thick with the heady scent of incense and sweat, a cloying mixture that made Krask's whiskers twitch with irritation. The cultists knelt in a loose circle around the altar, their heads bowed in reverence as Luthaen stood at its center, arms raised in a theatrical display of devotion. "Praise be to Slaaneshi, the bringer of ecstasy, the shaper of truth," Luthaen's voice rang out, rich and melodic, resonating with the fervent energy of the assembled cultists. Krask watched from the shadows, his crimson eyes narrowing as he observed the scene. The man-thing leader was in his element, weaving his web of words and promises to keep his flock obedient and blind. But Krask knew the truth now, and his claws itched to act. He waited until the chanting reached its fevered pitch before stepping into the dim light, his sleek, black-furred form a stark contrast to the humans' pale, robed figures. The chanting faltered as the cultists turned to see him, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. "Krask," Luthaen said smoothly, lowering his arms but maintaining his calm demeanor. "To what do we owe this interruption?" The Skaven assassin stalked forward, his tail lashing behind him like a whip. His sharp teeth glinted as he hissed, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I know your plan, scheme, man thing. Your lies, tricks will not work on me." Luthaen raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "Lies? What lies? We are all allies here, united in chaos." Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh, his claws flexing. "Hush! Do not play-act with me, fool thing. I heard your words. You plan to betray, turn on Clan Eshin, to destroy, kill us once your mission is done. Finish." Gasps rippled through the gathered cultists, their gazes darting between Krask and their leader. Luthaen, however, did not falter. He stepped down from the altar, his silken robes billowing around him, and met Krask's glare with an infuriatingly calm smile. "You are mistaken, Krask," Luthen said, his voice soothing yet condescending. "I act only in service to Slaanesh, as we all do. Perhaps your paranoia has clouded your judgment." Krask hissed, his tail striking the ground with a sharp crack. "Do not speak lie to me, man-thinking. I know what you said spoke. You believe Slaanesh will protect you from the wrath of Skaven. You are wrong." Luthen chuckled softly, the sound dripping with condescension. "Ah, Krask, you and your kind cling to your notions of survival and cunning, but you fail to see the true power of chaos. Slaanesh's favor is not something you can comprehend. It is more than protection, it is destiny, and you, like all pawns, are merely playing your part." The cult leader's words sent a ripple of unease through the gathered cultists, but Krask only growled, his claws scraping against the stone floor. "You think your god cares for you? Ha! You are nothing to chaos. Just as the horned rat uses a Skaven, your dark prince uses you. You are a fool thing, drunk on your own lies." Luthrien's smile widened, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. "And yet here we stand, you and I, both servants of powers far greater than ourselves. Tell me, Krask, how is your devotion to the horned rat any different from my devotion to Slaanesh?" The question hung in the air, the cultist watching in tense silence as Krrask bared his teeth in a snarl. "Because I do not pretend lie to myself," Krask hissed. "I know what I am. I know my place. You, man-thinking, believe you are chosen, special, but you are just a tool, a toy for your god's amusement, and when you break, you will be discarded." Luthen's expression darkened, the smile fading from his lips. He stepped closer to Krask, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "You underestimate the power of chaos, rat. You think your cunning makes you superior, but you are just as much a pawn as the rest of us. The difference is that I embrace my purpose, while you scurry in the shadows, clinging to your fear." Krask's claws tightened around the hilt of his dagger, his body coiled like a spring. "Fear keeps me alive, man-thing. It sharpens, protects. Your arrogance will break you, and when it does, I will laugh, as you fall." The tension in the room was palpable, the cultists frozen in place as the two figures stared each other down. Luthen's confidence was unshaken, but Krask's presence radiated danger, a reminder that he was more than just a tool. Finally, Luthen turned away, his tone dismissive. "Believe what you will, Krask, but know this. Slaanesh's favor will guide us to victory, and when the time comes, you will see the truth of my words." Krask watched him ascend the altar again, his tail flicking irritably as the cultists returned to their chanting. The assassin melted back into the shadows, his mind racing. Luthen's arrogance would be his undoing, but Krask knew he needed to act carefully. For now, he would play along, waiting for the moment when the man-thing's schemes would crumble. As the ritual continued, Krask slunk away into the tunnels, his sharp teeth glinting in a cruel grin. The betrayal was out in the open now, and the game had changed. Luthen thought himself invincible, protected by his god, but Krask knew better. No one, not even the chosen of chaos, escaped the bite of the shadows. Chapter 16. A Turning Point. The air in the hideout was electric, thick with tension as the cultists prepared for yet another ritual. The shadows stretched long against the walls, flickering with the violet and pink light of Slaanesh's twisted artifacts. Krask's claws clicked softly against the stone as he slinked through the tunnels, his ears twitching at the faint hum of voices echoing ahead. His instinct screamed danger, a sensation that had become all too familiar in the company of these man-things. He stopped abruptly, pressing himself against the wall as his whiskers twitched. There was movement in the next chamber, not the usual disorganized bustle of the cultists, but something sharper, more deliberate. His crimson eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary gathering. As he crept closer, Krask caught snippets of conversation. "Tonight, the Skaven learns the price of his treachery," came Luthien's smooth, venomous voice. "The Dark Prince demands sacrifice, and our rat ally has outlived his usefulness." A chorus of murmurs followed, punctuated by the clinking of weapons. Krask's claws flexed against the stone, his tail coiling behind him like a spring. He had expected treachery, but the timing was inconvenient. His sharp mind raced through his options: fight, flee, or turn their ambush against them. He was still weighing his choices when a shadow moved behind him. Too late, he had been flanked. The ambush. The cultists struck with a ferocity that betrayed their desperation. Blades flashed in the dim light as they surged toward Krask, their faces twisted in zealotry and malice. The assassin spun, his dagger slicing through the air with deadly precision. His first attacker fell instantly, gurgling as Krask's blade opened his throat. But more followed. 3, then 4, then 6. They poured from the shadows like a swarm, their chants mingling with the clash of steel. Krask darted and weaved, his movements a blur as he danced around their strikes. His claws raked across a cultist's chest, his tail lashed out to trip another. Yet even as he cut them down, their numbers pressed him back. "You cannot escape, rat!" Luthun's voice rang out, cold and triumphant. "The Dark Prince has decreed your end." Krask snarled, his crimson eyes darting toward the cult leader, who stood at the edge of the fray, watching with a smug smile. The assassin knew he couldn't hold out forever. Even his agility had limits, and these fanatics would overwhelm him eventually. A bolt of pink energy shot past his head, searing the air where he had stood just a moment earlier. A spellcaster, he realized, his teeth bared in frustration. The cultists were fighting with more coordination than he had anticipated. "Mankruth," Krrask hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "You will die for this treachery." But even as he fought, a sinking realization crept over him. He was cornered. Elren's defiance. Elren had heard the commotion from the adjoining tunnel. The clash of steel, the shouts of the cultists, and the hissing curses of Krask all blended into a chaotic cacophony. His heart pounded in his chest as he crept closer, peering into the chamber where the ambush was unfolding. He saw Krask surrounded, outnumbered but still fighting with a ferocity that made Elren shiver. The assassin moved like a predator, his claws and blade cutting through the cultists with ruthless precision. But it wasn't enough. And then Elren saw Luthain standing at the edge of the battle, his hands raised as he prepared another spell. A surge of dread shot through Elren as he realized what was about to happen. Krask was going to die. Something inside him snapped. Elren stepped forward, his trembling hands lifting instinctively as he focused on the chaotic energy that had been haunting him for weeks. The whispers of the artifacts, the dark power of Slaaneshi, they coalesced within him, a torrent of energy that burned like fire in his veins. "No!" Elren shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. The room seemed to freeze for a heartbeat as all eyes turned to him. Then, with a sudden burst of violet light, the power surged from his hands, slamming into the cultists nearest to Krask. The explosion of energy sent them sprawling, their screams cutting off abruptly as their bodies hit the stone floor. Krask spun toward Elren, his crimson eyes wide with shock. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the crackling of residual magic in the air. "Elren." Luthan's voice was a mixture of fury and disbelief. "What have you done?" Elren's chest heaved as he lowered his hands, his pale face glistening with sweat. I couldn't let you kill him," he said, his voice trembling. "This isn't right." Luthain's expression twisted into a mask of rage. "You dare defy the will of Slaaneshi? You are a heretic, Elren, a traitor to the cause." The remaining cultists turned their weapons toward Elren, their faces filled with hatred and betrayal. Elren's heart sank as he realized what he had done. In saving Krask, he had marked himself as an enemy of the cult. The aftermath. Krask wasted no time. While the cultist's attention was focused on Elren, he sprang into action, cutting down another attacker before leaping toward Luthien. The cult leader barely had time to raise his arms in defense before Krask's claws raked across his robes, forcing him to retreat with a snarl. "This is not over, rat." Luthien spat, disappearing into the shadows with a swirl of his silken cloak. The remaining cultists, leaderless and shaken, scattered into the tunnels. Krask straightened, his fur matted with blood as he turned to face Elren. "You fool thing," Krask hissed, his tone a mixture of anger and grudging respect. "You nearly died, broke yourself to save me. Why?" Elren hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. Because it was the right thing to do," he said quietly. Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh. "Ha! Right thing? Foolish, but effective. You survive, for now." Elren looked up, his expression conflicted. "And now? What happens now?" Krask's crimson eyes gleamed as he stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "Now, man-thing, you have no friends. Allies. Your cult hates, despises you. You are marked, alone. But if you wish to survive, live, you will follow me. My path is cruel, yes, but it is the only one left to you." Elren swallowed hard, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had chosen defiance, and there was no going back. "Fine," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "I'll follow you." Krask's grin was sharp and cruel. Good. But remember, man-thing, trust no one, not even me." As they disappeared into the shadows, the fractured alliance between cultist and Skaven took on a new, tenuous form. And though neither of them knew it, their actions that night had set in motion events that would change the fate of Nuln forever. Chapter 17. Chaos Erupts. The hideout was a cacophony of screams, clashing steel, and the crackling hum of uncontrolled magic. The air stank of sweat, blood, and the acrid tang of chaos energy. Krask moved through the chaos like a shadow, his claws slicing through cultists who dared to stand in his way. The Skaven assassin's crimson eyes burned with a cruel light as he darted and struck, leaving carnage in his wake. "Elren, Mulran, man-thing," Krask hissed, his tail whipping violently behind him as he slashed another cultist's throat. Elren stumbled behind him, clutching an improvised weapon, a jagged piece of metal pulled from the hideout's crumbling walls. His face was pale, and his breaths came in short gasps, but he forced himself to keep moving. Around them, the cult had descended into madness. It had all begun with Luthien's accusations of betrayal. Elren's act of defiance, combined with Krask's earlier sabotage, had shattered the fragile unity of the cult. Now, factions within the group turned on one another, their devotion to Slaaneshi driving them to violence in their desperation to prove their loyalty. Chanting voices rose and fell in the chaos, punctuated by screams as rival cultists clashed. Some had turned their fury on Elren and Krask, but others fought among themselves, their frenzied devotion devolving into madness. Krask darted through the fray, his sharp claws and dagger flashing in the dim, flickering light. He struck with ruthless efficiency, his movements fluid and precise. But even as he fought, his mind churned with frustration. "Fools, fools," he snarled under his breath. "They kill-destroy themselves before the work is done, finished, weak, stupid man-things." A catastrophic chain reaction. In the midst of the chaos, Elren and Krrask found themselves near one of the cult's ritual chambers. The walls were lined with stolen relics and enchanted artifacts, their energies crackling dangerously in the air. Krrask's sharp eyes immediately spotted the danger. These relics, they will break, explode, he hissed, pointing to the glowing artifacts. The man-things do not see, know their folly. If this chamber falls, so does their precious scoop. Elren's eyes widened as he realized what Krask meant. The chamber's location was directly beneath the gunnery school, and the unstable artifacts were primed to unleash chaos if disrupted. "Are you saying this is a good thing?" Elren asked, his voice trembling as he dodged a wayward spell cast by a frenzied cultist. Krrask bared his sharp teeth in a cruel grin. "Yes, yes, let them die. Destroy themselves. Their madness will finish what they could not plan do." Even as he spoke, a rogue bolt of chaos energy arced across the room, striking one of the larger artifacts near the center of the chamber. The relic let out a high-pitched whine, its surface cracking as violet light poured from within. Elren's stomach dropped. "Krask, we have to get out of here. That thing's going to—" "Run, flee, yes, yes," Krask interrupted, already darting toward the nearest exit. The two barely made it into the adjoining tunnel before the artifact detonated. The explosion ripped through the chamber, sending shards of stone and jagged metal flying in all directions. The shockwave knocked Elren off his feet, and the air was filled with a deafening roar as the ceiling began to collapse. Above them, the impact was catastrophic. The explosion tore through the foundation of the gunnery school, sending tremors throughout the city. Cannons, mortars, and barrels of gunpowder stored within the school ignited in a chain reaction, setting off a massive fireball that erupted into the night sky. The streets of Nuln shook as debris rained down, and panicked screams filled the air. Fighting through the madness, Krask hauled Elren to his feet, his claws digging into the boy's arm as he dragged him forward. "Move, man-thing, or you will die. Break here." Elren stumbled after him, coughing as dust and smoke filled the air. The hideout was collapsing around them, the structural damage from the explosion spreading through the tunnels like a ripple in a pond. Cultists screamed and scattered, their minds broken by the sudden chaos. As they navigated the crumbling passageways, another group of cultists appeared, their faces twisted with rage and desperation. They charged toward Krask and Elren, shouting accusations of betrayal. "Traitors, heretics, you will die for defying the Dark Prince." Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh. "You first as fool things." The assassin lunged forward, his claws slashing through the first attacker's throat. His movements were a blur of precision and ferocity, his tail lashing out to trip one cultist as he plunged his dagger into another's chest. Elren hesitated, his makeshift weapon clutched tightly in his hands. One of the cultists turned on him, a wild look in his eyes as he raised a jagged blade. Elren reacted instinctively, thrusting his weapon forward. The metal shard found its mark, and the cultist crumpled to the ground, blood pooling around him. Elren stared at the body, his hands trembling. I killed him." Krask's voice snapped him out of his shock. Yes, you kill, fight, or you die break. Keep moving, fool thing." The two continued their desperate escape, weaving through collapsing tunnels and battling stray cultists along the way. Every step brought them closer to freedom, but the danger was far from over. The aftermath. By the time they emerged into the open air, the city was in chaos. The explosion at the gunnery school had set off fires that spread through nearby districts, and the night sky glowed with an eerie orange light. Soldiers and civilians scrambled in the streets, shouting orders and searching for survivors. Krask crouched in the shadows of an alley, his fur matted with blood and grime. His crimson eyes scanned the chaotic scene, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. Good, he muttered. "The man-things burn. Their strength is broken. The mission is done, finished." Elren slumped against the wall beside him, his face pale and streaked with dirt. "We barely made it out alive," he said, his voice shaking. "And the cult, they're gone." Krrask tilted his head, his grin widening. Yes, yes. Your cult is dead finished, man-thing, and yet you survive. Perhaps you are not as weak as I thought. Think. Elren didn't respond. He stared at the distant flames, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him. The cult was gone, the gunnery school was destroyed, and his life was irrevocably changed. Krask rose to his feet, his tail flicking behind him. Come, man thinking, there is more to do. Work. This city is weak now, broken. We can use this chaos to our advantage. Elren hesitated, then nodded slowly. He didn't know what lay ahead, but for now he would follow Krask. There was nothing else left. As they disappeared into the shadows, the fires of Nuln burned brightly behind them, a testament to the destructive power of chaos and the ruthlessness of those who wielded it. Chapter 18. A Final Confrontation. The crumbling ruins of the cult's hideout were a fitting stage for the end of Luthain's schemes. The collapse had turned the once grand chamber into a labyrinth of broken stone and smoldering debris. A faint, acrid mist hung in the air, glowing faintly with residual chaos energy. In the center of it all, Luthain stood tall, his silken robes torn, but his presence no less commanding. The swirling energy of Slaaneshi pulsed around him, illuminating his sharp features, and the malevolent smile stretched across his face. "Ah, Krask," Elren, Luthain purred, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I wondered if you'd survive. How amusing that you've come here, of all places, like moths to a flame." Krask's crimsoned eyes narrowed as he slinked into the chamber, his claws flexing. His sleek fur was streaked with grime and blood, his tail swaying behind him like a poised whip. Elren followed, limping slightly and clutching his side, his pale face lined with exhaustion. "No more games, tricks, man-thing," Krask hissed, his sharp teeth bared. "Your cult is broken, your schemes failed burned. Now you die, brat." Luthain chuckled, spreading his arms as if to embrace the chaos around him. "Do you truly believe that? Look around you, Skaven. Chaos thrives in destruction. This city burns because of us, and Slaaneshi's favor still shines upon me. You may have undone my followers, but I am more than a leader. I am the chosen vessel of the Dark Prince." Elren stepped forward, his trembling hands balling into fists. "You betrayed all of us, Luthain. The cult, the mission, you didn't care about any of it. You only cared about yourself." Luthain turned to Elren with a sneer. "Oh, Elren, sweet, naive Elren, you still cling to the idea that any of this was ever about you. Slaaneshi demands beauty and chaos, and I have delivered. But you have proven yourself a traitor. You've chosen to side with this vermin." He gestured to Krask with disdain. Krask hissed sharply, his tail snapping against the ground. "Talk, speak all you want, man-thing. You will bleed, break, just like the others." The showdown. Luthain raised his hands, and the air around him shimmered with an unholy light. The residual energy in the chamber surged toward him, coalescing into crackling tendrils of violet and pink that snaked around his body. His voice echoed with unnatural power as he chanted words in a language that clawed at the edges of reality. Krask darted forward, his dagger gleaming as he struck with the speed and precision of a predator. But as he closed the distance, one of the tendrils lashed out, striking him in mid-air. The Skaven was hurled backward, slamming into a jagged pillar of stone. "Ha! Weak, foolish rat!" Luthain laughed, his voice resonating with the power of Slaaneshi. Krask groaned, his claws digging into the stone as he pulled himself to his feet. His crimson eyes blazed with fury. "I am not done finished, man-thing," he spat, his tail coiling tightly as he prepared for another attack. But before he could act, Elren stepped forward, his hands trembling as they began to glow with a faint violet light. "Elren," Krask hissed, his voice laced with warning, Do not act fubble. This is no time for your foolishness." Elren ignored him, his gaze fixed on Luthen. "You are wrong about me, Luthen," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'm not a pawn. Not yours, not Slaanesh's. I choose my own path." Luthen sneered. "And what will you do, boy? Channel the Dark Prince's power against me? You barely understand what you wield." Elren's hands flared brighter, the chaotic energy surging around him. The whispers of Slaanesh filled his ears, seductive and maddening, but he pushed them aside, focusing on the power itself. His veins burned as he channeled the energy, feeling it coil and writhe within him like a living thing. With a cry of defiance, Elren thrust his hands forward, releasing a torrent of violet fire that surged toward Luthen. The cult leader raised his hands to shield himself, but the raw power overwhelmed him, tearing through his defenses. Luthen screamed as the flames engulfed him, his body writhing in agony as the energy consumed him. The chamber shook as the magic reached its peak, the unstable energies destabilizing the already crumbling structure. Krask shielded his eyes, hissing as debris rained down around them. When the light finally faded, Luthen lay motionless on the ground, his once pristine robes burned and tattered. His lifeless eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, the smug confidence forever gone from his face. The cost. Elren staggered, his legs buckling beneath him as the last of the chaotic energy drained from his body. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as sweat poured down his face. Krask approached cautiously, his crimson eyes narrowing as he studied the boy. You live survive, man-thinging. Barely." Elren groaned, his hands trembling as he tried to push himself up. I did it. He's gone." Yes, Krask said, his tone cold. "But you are weak-broken now. Pathetic." Elren glared at him, his exhaustion giving way to frustration. "You could at least say thank you. I just saved your life." Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh. "Ha! You think I needed saving. Foolish. But your power, it was useful, yes. Do not expect gratitude from me." Elren slumped back against the wall, his body trembling from the effort of channeling so much energy. He felt hollow, as though the magic had drained something vital from him. Krask turned away, his tail flicking dismissively. "Rest, heal quickly, man-thing. There is still work to do. This city is not finished, and neither are we." Elren closed his eyes, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. Luthen was gone, but the cost of his victory was clear. He was weaker than ever, his body and mind teetering on the edge of collapse. And yet, for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He had chosen his path, defied his master, and survived. For now, that was enough. Chapter 19. A Bitter Victory. The fires of Nuln still raged as the first light of dawn seeped through the smoke-choked sky. From their perch atop a ruined structure near the city's outskirts, Krrask Thin-Tail watched the chaos unfold with a sharp-toothed grin. The once proud city of man-things was broken. Soldiers scrambled to contain the fires, and panicked citizens fled through the streets. The gunnery school was reduced to rubble, its mighty forges silenced forever. "Ha! Stupid, stubborn man-things," Krask muttered, his crimson eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. "Their pride is ash dust now. A fine victory for Clan Eshin, yes. Behind him, Elren sat slumped against a crumbling wall, his body trembling from exhaustion. His pale face was streaked with dirt and sweat, and his hands still shook from the chaotic power he had unleashed to destroy Luthen. The boy looked as if he might collapse at any moment, but his eyes held a flicker of defiance as he watched Krask. "You call this a victory?" Elren said weakly, his voice hoarse. "The city's burning, the cult is gone, and Luthen's dead. But what did it cost? How many people died for this madness?" Krask turned to him with a sharp, chittering laugh, his tail flicking behind him. Cost? Ha! You think like a fool, man-thing. Victory always has cost, price, but I live, survive, and that is all that matters. Elren shook his head, his gaze dropping to the ground. You're impossible. Yes, yes, Krrask hissed, his grin widening, and that is why I survive, live while your precious cult falls. A decision in the shadows. As the city burned in the distance, Krask turned his thoughts to what came next. The Night Lord of Clan Eshin had sent him to Nuln with a singular purpose, to weaken the man-things and prepare the city for the coming of the Skaven. That goal had been accomplished. The gunnery school was destroyed, the city was in disarray, and the cult, though ultimately a disappointment, had served its role in sowing chaos. It was time to return to Skavenblight and report his success. But then there was Elren. The Boython had proven both a liability and a surprising asset. He was weak, soft, and foolish, but his latent power had saved Krask's life and destroyed their mutual enemy. That power was dangerous, unpredictable, and potentially useful. Krask crouched down in front of Elren, his sharp teeth bared in a predatory grin. "Man-thing," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You live. Survive, for now. But what will you do? Do? Your cult is gone, your city burns, you have nothing. Yes, yes." Elren met Krask's gaze, his expression weary but determined. "I'll survive," he said quietly. "Maybe that's all I can do now." Krask tilted his head, his whiskers twitching. A good answer, man-thing. Survival is all that matters. But you are weak, broken. You will die brave without guidance, without purpose." Elren frowned, his hands clenching into fists. "And you're offering me, what, to follow you? To live like a rat in the shadows?" Krask's tail lashed out, striking the ground near Elren's feet. "Yes, yes, a rat survives, lives while others die, drunk. You have seen, learned this truth. Follow me, man-thinging, and you may live. Survive, refuse, and the flames of this city will consume you." Elren hesitated, his mind racing. He hated Krrask's cold pragmatism, his utter disdain for anything resembling morality. But the Skaven was right about one thing. Elren was alone now. The cult was gone, and the city offered no sanctuary. If he stayed, he would surely die. Finally he nodded, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "Fine, I'll follow you. But don't think I'll become like you, Krask. I still have a choice." Krask chittered softly, his grin sharpening. "Ha, fool thing! You think you have choice? Chaos has no choices, only survival. But you will learn, see, yes, yes. Come now, man-thing. There is work to do, and I will not wait pause for you." Leaving Nuln. As the sun rose higher, casting a dim light over the smoldering ruins of Nuln, Krask and Elren descended into the sewers. The city above was no longer their concern. Its fate was sealed, and the Skaven's work was done. The tunnels stretched out before them, dark and winding, their damp walls echoing with the distant skittering of unseen rats. Krask led the way, his movements silent and purposeful, while Elren followed, his steps slower and more uncertain. For Krask, this was just another mission completed, another success to report to his masters. For Elren, it was the beginning of something he couldn't yet define, a journey into the unknown, with only a cunning and ruthless Skaven as his guide. As they disappeared into the shadows, the fires of Nuln burned on, a bitter reminder of the cost of chaos and the price of survival. Chapter 20. Shadows Remain. The endless tunnels stretched before Krask, twisting labyrinths of damp stone and fetid air that carried the scent of mildew and rot. It was a place where shadows ruled, where the only constant was the scurry of unseen claws and the drip of stagnant water. For a Skaven, it was home, a perfect realm of secrecy and survival. Krrask Thin-Tail moved through the darkness with practiced ease, his claws clicking softly against the stone as his tail swayed behind him. He glanced back briefly to see Elren trailing a few paces behind, his steps hesitant, his face pale and drawn. The boy looked as though he might collapse at any moment, his weakened body barely holding itself together. The sight filled Krask with the usual disdain, but also something else. A flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was simply the absurdity of it all. Mwad. Krask hissed, his voice echoing in the narrow tunnel. You stumble, trip like a blind rat. Keep up or you will fall. Die here. Elren glared at him, his exhaustion briefly giving way to frustration. I'm doing the best I can, Krrask, he snapped. Not all of us are born to skulk through filth. Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh, his sharp teeth glinting in the faint light. Ha ha ha! You think this is filth? This is life survival, man-thing. You stumble, complain, but the tunnels keep us safe. Hidden, the surface burns, yes, but the shadows endure. Elren said nothing, his gaze dropping to the ground. For a time they walked in silence, the only sounds their footsteps and the faint rustle of unseen vermin in the darkness. A reflection in the shadows. Krask's mind churned as they moved deeper into the labyrinth, his sharp eyes scanning the path ahead even as his thoughts wandered. The mission in Nuln was over, and it had been a success. At least by the standards of Clan Eshin. The gunnery school was destroyed, the city thrown into chaos, and the cult eliminated. And yet the journey had been anything but simple. The Skaven assassin found himself reflecting on the absurd series of events that had brought him here. A veteran of countless missions, Krask had worked alongside other Skaven, twisting them to serve his schemes when necessary. But a man-thing? A soft, foolish, chaos-touched human? It was a farce that should have ended in Elren's death long ago. And yet the boy had survived. More than that, he had fought. Weak and clumsy though he was, Elren had proven his usefulness, wielding a power that even Krask couldn't ignore. But that didn't mean Krask liked him. Far from it. The boy was still a liability, his idealism and naivety a constant source of irritation. Krask muttered to himself. Foolish man-thing. Weak, broken, but still alive, surviving. Absurd. A parting of ways. Eventually they reached a junction where the tunnel split into multiple paths, each one leading deeper into the endless maze. Krask stopped abruptly, his tail flicking as he turned to face Elren. This is where we part split, man-thing, Krask said, his tone flat and dismissive. I return to my kin clan. You go where you will. Try not to die-break too quickly. Elren stared at him, his expression unreadable. That's it? After everything, you're just leaving? Krask tilted his head, his crimson eyes narrowing. Yes. Our paths crossed because of necessity, not choice. You are no use need to me now. Your fate is yours alone. Elren hesitated, his gaze flickering between the dark tunnels ahead and Krask's sharp, unyielding figure. And what about you? He asked. What happens when you go back? Do you just keep following orders, living in the shadows, doing their dirty work? Krask let out a sharp, chittering laugh. Ha ha! You think you know me, man-thing? My purpose is simple. I survive. Live. Orders, schemes, they are tools, nothing more. The horned rat's will is cunning, yes, but I follow it because it serves my survival, not because I dream of purpose like you. Elren frowned, his fists clenching at his sides. Maybe that's enough for you, Krask, but it's not enough for me. I can't keep living like this, running, surviving, serving something I don't understand. Krask's whiskers twitched, his crimson eyes narrowing as he studied the boy. Foolish, but perhaps not stupid. If you truly seek find your own path, man-thing, you will need more than power. You will need cunning, strength. Learn this or die. Break. Elren nodded slowly, his expression resolute. I'll find my way, Krask, and maybe one day I'll prove to you that there's more to life than just survival. Krask snorted, his sharp teeth bared in a sneer. Ha, foolish dreams. But perhaps you will survive long enough to try. Farewell, man thing. Do not expect me to protect you again. With that, the Skaven turned and disappeared into the shadows, his movements silent and deliberate. Elren watched him go, a strange mixture of relief and regret filling his chest. As the echoes of Krask's claws faded, Elren turned toward his own path, his steps slow but determined. The tunnels stretched before him, dark and uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. The shadows endure. Far ahead, Krask moved through the darkness, his thoughts already turning to his next scheme. The boy thing was gone now, a piece removed from the game, yet the irony of their partnership lingered in his mind. Chaos forges strange alliances, he muttered to himself, his tail flicking. But the shadows remain always, and I remain with them. The Skaven assassin disappeared into the endless maze of tunnels, his sharp grin glinting in the dark. Behind him, the city of Nuln burned, and the echoes of betrayal and survival faded into the void. In the end, Krask was what he had always been, a shadow in the darkness, a survivor above all else, and the world of man-things would never be rid of him.